There we go. Got it.
Hello and welcome to the 14th episode of the Software Testing Strategy Summary Guide, where we talk about what's in every chapter of the book to help you decide if you want to make a little investment and give you some free ideas anyway, even if you don't. And I'm proud of it. Somebody the other day said this is promotional. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely it is.
the biggest work of our professional career. We're proud of it. We think you should get it, and we're investing our time and giving you more information to help you make a decision. And today's chapter is chapter 14, which is philosophy and ethics. So if you get into it, but it provides three different theoretical frameworks for ethics, and then dives in some length into virtue ethics, which is what I practice. But the advantage of that is it helps you make good decisions you can be proud of, so you can sleep at night. So instead of getting into kind of the academics, we wanted to tell some stories of when we were challenged in an ethical way and how we responded, and maybe how we would respond now, or how we see our options differently years after the fact. Now, let's introduce everybody. Hopefully, you know Michael Larson, co-author of the book. Worked at Social Text. We both worked under Ken Peer, but at different times. So we've got sort of that shared. And joining us is Nicholas Shaw. Hello, Nicholas. And so we usually have people on, we've known him for decades and we did this together and that. Nicholas, I really am excited because he's reaching our attention as new. He's been testing for a while, but I saw him on the Association for Software Testing Slack group. He's been super active on LinkedIn, picked up on the book, ordered it really fast, and now when he got in the Facebook group and we said we're going to meet the day after tomorrow, and we're going to at this odd time for Europe because he's coming to us from Belfast, Northern Ireland. And he was like, "I'm available. Let's get on the Zoom. Let's get this thing recorded," which is kind of crazy because we're gonna do this in one take. So thanks for being here. Looking forward to talking to you about it. He read the chapter like overnight. It's awesome. So Michael, you want to lead us off with a story?
Sure. So one of the things that I think is important with this, so we're looking at our book in three parts, right? The first thing is here are the skills that you probably want to have as a tester, and then here are ways that you can apply those skills. And now we're in the third part of the book, and the third part of the book deals squarely with the politics of testing. And that's where having philosophy and a little bit of understanding of what you're doing really makes a difference in the sense that if you don't have a philosophy about where your testing stands, you could be basically pushed into any corner and you can be asked to do anything. You just, okay, sure, I'll whatever, that's fine. And you have to step back and say, is this ethical? Is this something that I feel good about saying? Do I just say, oh yes, hey, we did the tests, it passed, without going into broader explanation of what that means? And if something happens, do I then panic and freak out and going, "Oh my gosh, my life is over. I can't believe I didn't think about that," or whatever, knowing full well that that's a very human thing and that's what happens. But if you don't have at least a little underpinning of that philosophical framework of where you stand with this, you can find yourself in situations where it's not fun. And I've been in those earlier on. And again, we talked about Ken Peer, and both Matt and I worked with Ken. Ken is no longer with us, sadly. He passed away back in 2015. But one of the things I really appreciated about Ken was Ken always led with philosophy, and he made it clear that he led with his philosophy. And I appreciated the fact that he would come into a meeting and he would explain, this is what we can do, this is what we can guarantee, this is what we can't guarantee. At no point did he ever say, oh, yeah, everything works great, or yes, you can count on it, we're fine, you can ship it. Never said that. He always said, based off of the run we had, based off of the tests we've done, based off of the known knowns that we have, and everything that we've worked with, the data that we've accumulated, we've gone through these scenarios, and to the best of our knowledge and the best of our skill, we have not found anything that would be of concern. Notice how that's worded, and notice the fact that that's not worded, oh yeah, everything's great, you can ship it. What he does is he says, "This is what we've been able to find. Now, if you feel comfortable based off of what I've just told you and the information that I've given you, and you want to make the decision to go and ship, you go right ahead. I would like to make sure, of course, that we have that in email that we've discussed this and that that's there, and you go ahead and do it." What has Ken done with that? What he's done is he's expressed very clearly what he has control over and what he doesn't. He's also expressed the fact that the ultimate decision to go live is not his. It's the rest of the organizations, it's the senior group in the organization. And very often, Ken would say, if somebody says, "Well, is this good to go? Or are we able to do this?" A phrase I loved hearing him say this because it gave me such comfort to hear it. He said, "That is above my pay grade." In other words, he was making it very clear, not in a weaselly way, not in a, well, yeah, he was saying, absolutely, Pat, this is what we can tell you. This is the information we can actually provide for you. The decision to go live is going to be yours. And you need to be able to sit with that. I will back you based off of what we've done here, but you will not be backing me into a corner and making me say something that I don't mean. And you will not be able to come back to me and say, "You told us X." No, I did not. I told you very clearly what we were able to do, and that based off of the information that we have at this point in time, this is what we feel. And we feel strongly that we're in a good place with this, but we cannot 100% guarantee, and you're not going to get 100% guarantee. That's a key philosophy learning that prior to that, I would not have been as confident to do something like that. But I do that now. And I make sure to do that now. And for me, that is what I call my Ken cred. And every time I go in a meeting, I think to myself, if I walk out of that meeting, did I preserve my Ken cred? And if I did, yes, cool. If I didn't, I have a feeling something's probably going to happen and maybe I should be a little concerned about it. But that's what I always lead with for myself personally. Did I preserve my Ken cred? And if you ever hear me use the term Ken cred, that's what that means.
That's great. There are a couple of things we can like tie in together from the book that I think might add to that. So I've been in a situation where I've been told that's not good enough. So I've pulled out our emergent risk list and said, these are the things that I would do if you gave me more time. Do you care? And hopefully, you know the mind of the customer enough that they look at that and they say, these are not that important. If they broke, I wouldn't be that worried. I think you covered the big things. Go ahead. And then if there's a problem and it's on your risk list, you say, well, I think we made the right decisions here, right? Why didn't you identify that risk? Well, we did identify the risk. We had a conversation about it, and the organization made a calculated decision to go live anyway. The other thing, which I don't think we get into in the book much, which might be worth exploring some other time, is this idea of being a staff officer. So in the military, you as a staff officer go
Mm.
spend 2 months of your life researching a topic. You have the logistics for getting the tanks to, the foreign country or whatever. And then you are given 15 minutes to brief the general on the concept. And what you have to do is understand the commander's intent so well that you come to the conclusions that were the same would that he would or she would if they had that 2 months to do the research themselves. And the way that you get that is through intense collaboration with that executive over time to learn their commander's intent. So I'm willing to do that if and when I get that kind of relationship with the lead. If I get that kind of relationship with the leaders, eventually I can reach a point where I can make the decision and say it's the exact same one you would have made, right? So I can save you time, but you're going to have to invest a little bit of time up front. The last thing I would contribute on this one is um, when we say philosophy, there are many people in the testing world that say, "I don't want none of that philosophy stuff. Just give me what to do." And okay, we can give you some things to do, but like the fundamental question that Ken was being pressured with that he came up with that particularly structured answer to is the software good enough? Well, good, right, in a subjective field, uh, philosophy is the study of the good, the right, the true, and the beautiful, and enough is a measurement of the intangible. So, like, if you don't think you're doing philosophy, I got news for you.
Absolutely, all the time.
You have any comments to add?
I think yeah, it's funny from reading the book. I'm probably one of those people who would have been like, ah, philosophy. I wouldn't have expected it to be in the book, and those kind of questions around, are you done? Is this good enough? I don't think I would have considered them philosophy before. So it was kind of surprising to read as I was going through it. A lot of my past experiences, they were coming to mind as I was going through it. And I wouldn't have thought about that as philosophy, but obviously it completely is. And yeah, I've had a lot of different experiences where, yeah, I wouldn't have tagged them to this chapter, but they helped me think through it, and actually, challenges I go through now and future ones, I think some of the contents here will actually be very useful to keep in mind in terms of how I handle those. Because I think I'm guilty of doing things wrong plenty of times, and there's some ideas here that I can start applying now. But I think, especially whenever I was considering the kind of ethical frameworks and the questions around that in the chapters, for me, it brought up some experiences around past work with implementing dark patterns and maybe not being aware of the language as to why that bothered me. Why, when I was working there, did I feel uneasy? Why was I unhappy? I at the time, or close to the time, if you asked me, I wouldn't have been able to tell you why. But I think now, being able to reflect back after reading your work, it would be that we were implementing dark patterns that, um, as I say, dark patterns are basically user experience that is implemented for the benefit purely of the company rather than the benefit of the end user. So in our case, it was a lock-in. Basically, it was like an online checkout flow, and the reason for the dark pattern was to keep customer click through, to keep those percentages up. So you can see why it's done. But on the other hand, I'm considering users of different disabilities, perhaps, or users of certain age groups that maybe aren't familiar with that, and implementing hidden pieces of work that affect the tab order, so they can't get out of something, and no X buttons to be able to close out of things to keep that retention high. For
Oh.
me, just made me feel uneasy. And as I say, I probably couldn't have put language to it at the time, but it it gave me a bad feeling and it made me want to get out of that job personally. So yeah, it's interesting to go through it and to read this and be like, I think that's exactly why. It's because it doesn't align with my kind of morals or ethics. I feel more strongly related to the end user as I see it. There's benefits to it, there's negatives to it, but for me, that kind of ratio was skewed massively towards the big corporation versus the little everyday guy.
So when I hear dark patterns, I think we're talking about the same thing. That would be user interface affordances that are extremely difficult or misleading, like a checkbox. I do not want to be on your email list. That means you do, or it comes as checked, and you can't check it. You have to scroll around the page and click back to get to it, and um, or cancel. Are you I don't wanna cancel. Give me another month free. And then, like, in the way bottom, it's like, "No, seriously, I do wanna cancel." And you're saying even worse than that, where they actually were changing the tab order to make it difficult for you to but that's not great. Yeah, yeah. And, that's well, I'm glad really glad to hear that was helpful. Um, yeah, you have any comments, Michael?
Yeah, there's a few things you run into. Again, a lot of the work that I've done and that I'm pretty proud of, frankly, is in the realms of accessibility and advocacy for accessibility. And this frequently comes up. And I would also put in that when we're testing, a lot of the time, we are given a mandate to do certain things, and we have X amount of time to do those things. And if we do them, that's great, right? And then we're expected to move on to the next thing. Now, if you're working with something like accessibility, oftentimes that really isn't enough. Hey, I've gone in and I've done this. Hey, I've gone in and I've confirmed that we have our alt tags populated. Yes, our images have text definitions. Great. Now, on the surface, I could just say, we pass. We're good. We're compliant, right? Now, though, what I have to ask is, am I really okay with that? Just where we're at with that? Because you can make something compliant and it's still horribly painful to use. So now you have to step back and say, okay, I've now said, yes, we meet the compliance. But now, having said that we meet the compliance, I have to put on my other hat and say, now, as the advocate for this, what are we doing here? Why are we going into this very painful process? Why are we giving so little of an explanation here? Why are we doing all of this stuff? Right? Let me see if I can give an example. If you have, let's say you have a grid, and in that grid, you've got a bunch of logos, right? And these are companies we work with. Okay, sure. Well, you get that list, and if you are a user who, for whatever reason, is not fully sighted and needs to tab through, and you hit an image that says image for test rail, image for Zephyr, image for Jenkins. Okay, well, I get that those are images. What's the context for that? Why would I care? Why is that here? Now, if you're a sighted user and you see it in the listing of everything else, and these are the tools that we use for our stuff. Okay. And maybe because you see them, you recognize them. Oh, I know what that is. Oh, I know what that is. Because you have logo understanding, right? What do you do when you don't have logo understanding? What do you do if it's just a word, right? Oh, hey, you use Jenkins, but I've never really understood it. If I see the word Jenkins, what does that mean? If I have experience with it and I know what Jenkins is as a build CI/CD system, great. But what if I don't? Right? I'll just pass over that. What's the context of that? Why do I care that you're using that as a tool? And if I'm a low-sighted, low-vision person, what can I take from that? Whereas if you select it and it says alt text, by the way, Jenkins is a CI/CD delivery and integration tool that allows you to do X, Y, and Z. That's so much more helpful and usable. But that's not something that you would then say, hey, somebody put the text in and great, cool, it's compliant. That's more along the lines of, hey, let's give them text that's actually meaningful. That goes beyond just testing for compliance. That's advocacy. And advocacy absolutely brings you into a realm of philosophy and ethics and fair play. Yeah, are we giving the best we can to our customers, or are we giving them the bare minimum so that we can get the minimum viable product out the door? Sometimes that makes sense. We need to get something out there that just does this. Cool. And we will be able to address this later. The question I would then ask, though, is especially when it comes to accessibility or inclusive design situations, is how far later are you going to actually address this? And are you really going to? Because I has questions.
That's good. Thanks. I will tell one short story. I haven't. It's not in the book. I think it's relevant though. There was an executive I worked with, and he dealt with downsizing, upsizing, resizing, right sizing over a period of years. And when he would be called into the meeting, and they would say, you're doing Project Foo, and you've got these 8 deliverables for your team of 12 people. We're going to add these 2 new projects. He'd say something like, okay, do we wait for things to finish and then add them? Or no, 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 we want you to multitask. Okay, well, that's going to push all my dates out by this much. No, 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 you need to do it all. And he'd be like, well, you gave me this many people and it's this much work. So if you want to add work to it, it's going to take longer, or you could give me more people. And that would be just consistent answer. That's just uh, we need it sooner. Give me more people. We need to take your people away. Here are your new deadlines, right? And this was I mean, it wasn't really a super high mature organization. He had some data, just the tiniest bit of data, which is more than most other people. Like, he knew the deadlines he had set and how much they had been missed by, so he could project when you're actually going to get done. Not a big deal. And he understood multitasking and how it impacted performance, which is in the lean chapter. And what would happen was he would either get people or his schedules wouldn't get adjusted. Now, why am I telling that in the philosophy and ethics chapter? Is because why was he successful in that? We all know those words. We all know you can't add 10 pounds to a 5-pound sack. And yet we say we'll try. We'll try. We'll see. I'll do what I can because we lack. I'm not trying to be tough on anybody. Maybe tough on myself. There is a moral attribute. We talk about the four cardinal virtues: justice, prudence, temperance, and fortitude. Fortitude is practical courage. And if I look at all of the moral failings I've had of the past 10 years, the ones that had the biggest material impact to my life as a business owner, hundreds of thousands of dollars, um, friends' careers to some extent, friends' marriages to some extent, lack of courage. It's the one thing that, and I could tell lots of stories about lots of people. Nobody's perfect. We've all got our mistakes, but he consistently generated courage under pressure, and it's not that hard to do. I think we might do another follow up with some stories about that because there can be consequences for showing courage. But in general, you get to sleep at night, and you're probably not gonna starve, right? What do you think about that?
I think it's fair, and again, that is one of the things that having that experience with Ken helped considerably. Over the years, I did find myself in that situation because to be fair, and this is just my personal choice, I have more times than not I've been a lead, and I've been somebody who has been a de facto manager, or I've done director level work in nonprofits or volunteer type things. For various reasons, I've stayed away from being in management. I don't want to say because I didn't want the buck to stop with me, but because I wanted the ability to not have to compromise, if that makes any sense. To where I knew that if I took on that management role, I was going to have to be the person who might have to throw somebody under a bus to make something happen, and that never sat well with me. So, I'm not saying that's the reason that I've never deliberately moved into management, but it's one of them. It is one to where, can I see myself playing the weasel role? And again, please understand, if you're a manager or director out there, I am not necessarily speaking to you saying that's a de facto state, but I've seen it enough times,
Well,
and I've witnessed it enough times.
there are organizations where it's a competition, and the higher up you go, the more skilled your competition is. And so typically that happens anytime, like, when the pie is growing, when you were at Cisco Systems, there's room for everybody and we're
Oh,
all
yeah.
up together, not so much. But when you're in a shrinking economic cycle, high interest rates, not a lot of investment, people are saving and not buying, which is what we're experiencing.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
it's kind of like musical chairs, and when the music stops, if you don't have a chair, you're out in the layoff world, which many of us are experiencing. So, like, to say I don't want to be a there's a book we mentioned, it's Corporate Confidential, which is 50 secrets to how to succeed in the corporate marketplace, which seems to ignore the ethical dimension entirely. It's just like these things work, so you should do them. If you're gonna say, I don't I don't I don't wanna do that, that's then you have to say, "Well, what am I going to do? How am I going to behave authentically? How transparently am I?" You probably don't wanna be completely transparent. You don't wanna run out in the streets and tell everyone your plan because that mu so how transparent do I wanna be? How do I share? How do I grow? How do I build relationships? I mean, um I guess what I'd say is I spent my 20s bumbling around doing it poorly, and our hope is that we've at least
That
helped people get the
that's a stand yeah, if it makes you feel any better, I'm a little older than you, but that's exactly how I spent my 20s as well. I will not speak for Nicholas, I think he's probably closer to that than both of us, so
yeah.
No comment. No comment.
Well, our hope is that we kind of accelerate you and help you to not make some of the mistakes we've made. We're real proud of it. And any closing thoughts, James or Michael or Nicholas? Nicholas?
I think, yeah, let's give Nicholas a chance to speak on this. I think you and I have riffed enough here.
No, it's really good to listen to you guys talk away. I think for me, there's a lot of content in there. As I say, it helped me reflect on a lot of different experiences, and kind of like what Matt mentioned there around fortitude. I think it's given me a sense of empathy, maybe for some of my coworkers, kind of beside, above, and below. Just in terms of, I think you touch on it in a chapter about that level of fortitude perhaps being a luxury that maybe other people don't have. And I think I've always had that sort of level of confidence in terms of just personally and professional skill set and things like that, where I've maybe been able to have those conversations about priorities. Give the list to a manager and say, okay, I've got 1 and 2, you want me to add this on, where does this fit in the priorities? Because I can only work on one thing at one time. Um, Whereas, yeah, I have empathy for others that maybe haven't been able to have that conversation because maybe they're worried about loss of income and things like that. So, yeah, I was really surprised by the chapter. I think there's a lot of good stuff in there, and yeah, thank you for constructing it.
You're very welcome. And again, I think that's what makes this book different than a lot of books out there. I think and again, no disparagement, no down talking to any other books out there. There's a lot of books I think are fantastic, but they're written from a technical level. They're written from the focus of these are the skills that you need if you want to survive. These are the skills you have to know how to do. And that is perfectly understandable, very reasonable. We need those books. But what I think sets us apart, and I'm going to go on a limb here, a little bit of a limb, because I really believe this. I think that what we're offering with our software testing strategies book, and yes, forgive the shameless self promotion here, is that we are saying we want you to be a solid tester. We want you to have excellent skills. We want you to be a leap above everybody else around there. But we want you to do it with your humanity intact. And we want to improve your humanity along with your testing skills. And frankly, I think that's what sets this book just a little bit apart from everybody else.
And to sort of piggyback on both of those comments, the one thing so many things the book is out and you're like, "Oh, I should have put that in there. Oh, man." Chapter 14 is it's kinda preachy. It's like, "We got everything figured.
Yeah,
We got it dialed in, and this is how you can be honest and true and loyal like us." And
deeply opinionated might be a better
there's
way
another
of
guy I worked
looking
with
at
for a while named Dave Limbaugh at Priority Health. If we do a second edition, we gotta put this in there. I was talking to Dave Limbaugh about integrity one time, and he said, and there's an old prayer, Lord, help me forgive those who sin differently than I do, right? So
it.
at this point in time, writing the book, looking back on my career, when you look at the ethical stuff, like I said, I, integrity, not so much my biggest problem. And I am pretty tough on those that display a lack of integrity. But, but like courage, lack of courage. That's a big deal. So, like, I definitely, I do not claim to be perfect, nor having attained it. I just press on, and I'm very aware of my own flaws. And if this chapter came off that I have it all figured out and I know all the answers, so what I do maybe is I have a plumb line that I can draw to see what the right answer is that shows me how far off I am. And then I get up every morning and try to be a little closer, if that means anything to
Yeah. And also one of the things that we didn't really touch on this, but it's definitely one of the philosophical elements we focus on in the book, and that's That's the principle of shuhari. And if you've ever done any type of martial arts or any type of art discipline in general, shuhari is something you may not know by name, but you've done it. You've been there. And that is where you take your forms, you practice. It's like if you go into a gym, the first thing that you learn, like, yeah, you want to get swollen jack. That's great. That's a great end goal, but you're not going to get there if you don't actually work out and do the things you need to do. So the first thing you have to do is you have to learn how to do the lifts that you're going to do in the gym safely, because if you don't do them safely, you're going to get injured and then you're not going to be good to anybody. You need to learn that and how to put that into place. Over time, you're going to start to make little tiny corrections because you're going to notice, hey, I'm doing okay, but maybe I could do better. Maybe I could do better. I'm looking at this other person. How are they doing it? You start to witness what other people are doing and you start to incorporate that in. That's the ha part of it. And then by the time you get to re, it's just automatic. You know what you need to do. And then you focus on some other element that's completely foreign, or, hey, I haven't really paid much attention to this. And you start over again. And that it's that constant peeling away and then packaging up the onion again, if because it's a 3 it's in words, they're difficult. It's 3 circles within each other, basically. You know, shu is at the center, ha is outside of that, and re is just the actualization. And then you move on to the next piece and you're busted down to 0 again.
And that's not the only learning model we talk about. It's one, it's a good one. I like, "Come do this thing with me and learn by observation," but that only works in certain environments, so you wanna be careful with that. We're gonna include the whole thing, my awkward, mistaken words and all. We did it all in one take, and I wanna keep doing it because 'cause I'm having so much fun. Thank you for being with us, Nicholas. Let's do this again soon.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Michael. Cheers.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us.